Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and this is the first day of the 2012 Global Education Conference. And to say that things have been fast and furious would be an understatement. It has just been an exciting day with back-to-back keynotes from the beginning of the day, and we're so excited to have Cator here. Karen's the Director of the Office of Educational Technology for the U.S. Department of Education. Karen, thank you.
Thank you.
Delighted to have you here. Thanks to our sponsors this year. We've had a really terrific year of enthusiasm behind the conference. It is the conference's third year, and it's been really exciting to see the interest grow. We so appreciate those who have sponsored and supported the conference. This is the chance for those of you who are listening to indicate where you're participating from. I have a sense this may be a U.S.-centric audience, but that's not guaranteed, I guess. Look for the star to the left of the map. I'm going to click on that star and then click on the map. Karen will be surprised to know that I'm holed up in a hotel outside of Washington, D.C., where the weather is actually quite nice. So feel free to post in the chat. Continue to let people know where you're participating from as we move forward. If you're listening to the recording, we sure appreciate that you're doing so. Karen, again, I'll turn the time over to you with gratitude for your being here and making time today.
Thank you very much, Steve. And before I start, I want to do just a tremendous thank you and shout out to both Steve Hargadon and Lucy Gray for kind of an amazing feat in organizing and facilitating and pulling off a conference that is global, is all online, is, as you say, start to finish, just sessions and really interesting content all day long. So thank you, Steve, and also to Lucy for an amazing amount of work. And thank you to all of you who have joined in the chat room. I know some of you, so welcome to friends, and also welcome to people who I haven't had a chance to meet. We have about an hour to kind of chat about a variety of things that are happening in the U.S., out of the U.S. Department of Education. I'm well aware this is a global audience, so some things may seem a little U.S.-centric, but rest assured we're thinking about a lot of this as it pertains to global interactions and kind of learners of all ages and in all places. So definitely happy to be here. I'm going to run through just some slides and give you some background on the things that we've been working on for, maybe 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and then hopefully have plenty of time for interaction and questions, and Steve will be moderating that. So again, welcome to all of you. So as you know, or many of you know, that 2 years ago now, we published the U.S. Department of Education published the National Education Technology Plan, which is titled Transforming American Education, Learning Powered by Technology. The big focus on learning, the big focus on all of the opportunities to learn together online. It has a chapter on teaching, which is about the highly connected teacher. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It puts forth the vision that learning can be highly participatory, can be scaffolded and supported with lots of online materials and support, so we'll talk a little bit about that. It can provide feedback and information to learners and teachers and others all the time and in the context of learning. The infrastructure required for this high vision of advancing the opportunity to learn is broadband, and it is access points or devices or places that people can actually go to get online, to connect with other people and the like. All of this is really supporting a much more productive, efficient, interesting, effective, and engaged learning environment for all learners. So that's the National Education Technology Plan. Just the backdrop, that's what we sort of have launched all of our initiatives based on that plan. So last year in February, Secretary Duncan, for the first time, sort of said, we really need to transition to digital learning in the next 5 years. So it was kind of a point in time where at the highest levels we had this articulation that we need to think about digital learning. We need to do this transition from print to digital. Now I want to make really clear that this was not about shiny objects and just the fact that we love technology, but rather in order to get many more students over a much higher bar, we need to continue to advance the opportunity to learn with each other, to learn from people, and learn from books, and advance literacy and the ability to read, and now also learn within the context of this new emerging digital online learning environment. So that's the context. It's very important to think about. Previous to the printing press, we could learn from people. With the printing press and the evolution of books and print materials, once people learned how to read, they could learn from people and from books. And now we still can learn from people, still from books, and now with this digital learning environment. So that's kind of the background and context. Some of the trends in technology that are happening globally are very much supporting this work. We're seeing many more people globally with mobile devices, whether they be small phones or smartphones or tablet devices or laptops or computers or whatever they are. We're seeing many more people with mobile access to the 24/7 always on internet. We're also seeing many more social interactions for learning, the places that people can get together online and learn together. We're seeing a proliferation of much more advanced and evolved digital content. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And we see this sort of transition from, or this integration of some fully online courses, some blended courses, some connection between people learning in school, out of school, in this sort of blended environment of learning in a variety of ways. So these are some of the things that we're seeing. We're also seeing a proliferation of data, which we also will talk more about. So I'm going to talk about 4 initiatives that we have that we've been working on, and then we'll go ahead and have conversation. But personalized learning is 1, the Connected Educator project is 2, Learning Registry is 3, and finally the Education Data Initiative. So when we think about personalizing the learning environment, it's been important for us to sort of define this, because many people kind of have in mind students kind of plugged into headphones and all learning by themselves and kind of going through things at their own pace. And we want to say that yes, it is about the ability to individualize so that students are doing, say in mathematics, the problem sets and the kinds of things, they're having access to the kinds of things that are most useful to where they are as an individual learner. But we also know that we can do much better and provide much more differentiated strategies and differentiated types of instruction and projects and the like, things that are different for multiple learners and multiple people. And then third, we also can integrate then variety of interests, background experiences, background languages, preferences, lots of things that kind of round out what's happening in the classroom and out of the classroom. And this is sort of this definition of personalized learning, the ability to individualize and differentiate and incorporate interests, experiences, preferences. Pre-technology, fabulous, amazing teachers have been able to actually personalize an environment for students. And now what we're seeing is with the proliferation of technology, there's much more ability to fully personalize what's happening for students. So as students can, wonder about things and ask their own questions and do their own research and keep their own portfolios and manage their own photos and their own music and their own projects and their own research and the like. That's what we're seeing that definitely enables kind of this personalized learning environment. We also are seeing many more, kind of the expansion of open education resources. The Open Courseware initiative has been a global initiative for years, and now we're seeing these new massively open online courses that are being supported by sort of high-end colleges and universities across the United States and globally as well. The Coursera is coming out of Stanford University, the ability to take free open courses on a variety of topics. edX has come out of MIT and Harvard. Udacity was started by someone who was teaching artificial intelligence at Stanford, and you've probably heard that story, so we won't go into that. And finally, Khan Academy, that kind of put in the public consciousness this notion that people could, in fact, find explanations of things and could learn online. All of these definitely support a formal education process, right? They can support teachers in classrooms. They can support people who have varied interests and want to go deep on a certain topic. They can support personalization. People who are close by, these courses require people to find the individuals, whether they be experts or colleagues or peers or local teachers and the like, that can actually support their learning. But there is sort of an evolution and a lot of innovation happening in this space as we speak. Peer-to-peer university, the previous slide, these new MOOCs are kind of courses taught by quote-unquote experts in the field, and they tend to be more associated with kind of formal learning. Peer-to-peer university is you can learn anything with your peers, and people can be an expert or even know something about something, and they can go ahead and teach a course to peers. So again, these opportunities to learn together are online, are advancing. Badges are something that are going to give credence, I think, to many of these courses and many of these opportunities to learn online. And this is a newer project that's happened over the last couple of years to advance kind of a system of badges that people can begin to collect and display, and will help them articulate the kinds of things that they know and that they can do. So that's thinking about personalizing learning and the opportunities to advance personalized learning. And we can talk more about that in the discussion. So the next, Connected Educators. So the Connected Educators project came out of the National Education Technology Plan with the idea that we can, in fact, learn much more about how people can learn together online. And it really has to do with personalizing learning for professional educators or with professional educators. So Connected Educators, there's a website, connectededucators.org, that has lots of information about how to create these kinds of communities of practice online. There are places where you can think about how to create your own personal learning network. And I actually saw Andrew Gardner in the room here, and Andrew I would consider as one of the premier kind of people who articulate what it looks like and how you create a personal learning network and who might be in it and where you can in fact go to learn. Helping everybody understand how they can do that to advance their own learning is something that we're seeing and that we're very interested in. One of the offshoots of this project is we've also worked with the Friday Institute in North Carolina to launch a community of practice for people trying to manage their own sort of digital transition. So schools are all, in many cases, learning alone and trying to figure things out all over again, when in fact they could be part of a community, they can find, acceptable use policies or classroom management strategies or other fourth grade teachers who are, now trying to figure out how to manage their classroom when all students have devices, people trying to incorporate informal learning into the classroom and the like. So this is a community of practice that we launched with the Friday Institute through a contract that is, I would say, in its infancy, but a place that we're hopeful will in fact support all sorts of folks. Well, that's an interesting color. It was not that color before, but this nice pink and fuchsia, this color of Connected Educator Month. This is interesting because I see this conference that Lucy and Steve and others have designed and developed this week as being kind of a fantastic display of how we can in fact connect people together to learn. We, in the month of August, decided to spotlight all of the opportunities to learn together online. So we ran something called Connected Educator Month, where we focused on a variety of organizations that all were producing and providing opportunities for either their members or for people in general to learn together, specifically focused on public education, or on education. And so what we saw happen that month, there were 389 activities and events that were hosted by 150 organizations and over 2,200 speakers, and this was over a month. 90,000 hours of professional development was the estimate that people completed. It took off kind of online and with an average of 1.2 million Twitter impressions a day. And today I decided to just do a search for Connected Educator Month, and there were 140, in quotes, and there were 147,000 estimated results. So what we're seeing is this is an idea whose time has come. In the United States, the federal government provides grants to school districts or to states and districts in the amount of about $2.5 billion a year to support professional development. And so what we're seeing is now, with the distribution power of the internet and the participatory nature of online environments, that we can in fact see better opportunities for people to learn together. We don't, there isn't a lot of evidence that a lot of our existing professional development strategies that have to do with sort of in-service days and specific sort of after single day classes and the like have a tremendous impact on the classroom. So what we're trying to do is think about the more innovative and newer ways that people can in fact learn together, and how we can personalize learning for professional educators. So this is tremendous, and I see this week in this conference kind of a global rendition of what happened in the United States in August. This is, I will admit, I don't really even know what all this represents, but it is basically a map, a visualization of all of the interactions that were taking place during that month. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But within the context of this project, we are doing some research with the people the group that we're working with, the American Institute of Research, AIR, and Friday Institute, and others, to understand more about how to look at social network analysis and the like to help us continuously improve and continuously evolve the work that we're doing. There were a lot of different things that happened, from open houses in communities to topics around everything from global education to flipped classrooms, how to get connected, what to do the first weeks of school, like how to manage your classroom. And then we also had a leadership week where we focused on leaders as learners and the ability to learn together online. So this was an interesting week. A month. There was also, partway in, we realized that probably many of the people, if not most, were people who were already connected. They already were, accessing these opportunities and already had the ability to find and interact and take advantage of these opportunities. So we started trying to get people to go find a friend, to find one person who is not currently connected, help them begin to develop their own personal learning network, help them begin to expand the opportunities and their friends' ability to also take advantage of these online learning opportunities. So Connected Educator Month was an incredibly interesting and fun and I would say successful foray into this. Next is the Learning Registry, and this is something that we started with the Department of Defense and Department of Education, but it has expanded to be sort of an open project, and in fact, many colleagues from other countries have also been involved in leveraging and thinking through how to use Learning Registry. Let me do a quick scenario. So if you're a teacher and you're looking for resources to use with your classroom to teach a specific topic and the like, you look out online and you do a search, you find things, but there is so much out there and it's fairly disorganized. You can actually find more granular information and more helpful information searching for something like, rhubarb pie or, a bottle of wine or something like that than you can looking for specific learning resources. So what we started thinking about is that most of these resources are organized within the context of portals, and everybody has kind of their own portal in different ways that they can that they've organized resources for their particular community members and constituents. And so as a professional educator, you can go to these different portals and you can do searches and find resources, but you need to make the connections from portal to portal. So if you're doing something and you find, say, pictures of Mars at NASA, and then you might go over to the Smithsonian and find some some ancillary and associated resources that you want to, and you want to use both of these kinds of resources to put together a lesson plan that you may then publish within, say, Brokers of Expertise or Thinkfinity or the like. So that's kind of the current state. And so we started thinking about what would happen if these resources actually, when somebody does a search, could find the teacher, could find the educator, rather than them having to go to these different portals. What would happen if when they did a search, all the resources from a variety of portals would come to the educator? So that was the idea behind the Learning Registry, that if everybody who owns a portal would register their content in the Learning Registry, then when you go and search in any of the portals that are also consuming from the Learning Registry, so there's publishing to the Learning Registry, and then there's consuming from the Learning Registry. If they're at a portal that consumes from the Learning Registry, their users could in fact find all of the resources associated with what it is they're searching for, not just within that portal, but also from across anywhere else that has published to the Learning Registry. So again, the ability to have resources find the user in a much more kind of efficient manner. So this is just some more pictures of that. So when we think about global participation and what this means for people, so various states and also countries can share their content alignment. So there are materials all over the world in a variety of places that are useful to professional educators. So the more people that publish and share their content alignment into the Learning Registry, the more that teachers can find when they're actually doing searches. Publishers who have content can share one time. So whether it's the public broadcasting networks, or whether it is Khan Academy or whoever it is, if they share one time, other people can then in fact find the resources wherever they may search. Developers can then build some awesome applications that will in fact make use of this open data and this information about the data about content and tools and resources. Teachers again can find the right resources, and researchers can begin to also use this data to identify the most used content or maybe the most effective content. There will be sort of no end to the kinds of things that can be advanced as we do much more in this arena. And finally, that's associated, the Learning Registry is associated with something we're calling the Education Data Initiative, and it has to do with open data sets and data transparency. So the Education Data Initiative is all about, as we say, liberating education data. And we do think that data and big data will fuel innovation, and it will be the rocket fuel of personalized learning. And we also know that we need to rigorously protect personal privacy. So all of our data initiative work is kind of situated in building agency, building empowerment, building access, building transparency, while protecting privacy and making sure that responsible use of data is advanced. So 3 kinds of open data in the context of the work that we're doing. First, across the U.S. Department of Education and across lots of governments, there is freely available machine-readable data, and we want to make it accessible, without restriction. Make it this open data so that people can use it to do all sorts of things, whether it be build new applications on that data, find information, mash it up with another data set, and the like. The second, we also have sets that are protected, but they may be available. They may be able to be made available to qualified researchers or people who have special dispensation for access to that data. So we want to make that easier and more usable. And then third, we're thinking about data that is private or personal data that is rigorously protected. But we want to make that data available back to the consumer, to the learner, to the teacher in open and consensus industry formats. And this is also known in the topic as a personal smart disclosure data. So more on that. So we've been thinking about this notion of my data. So this actually started in healthcare, where the idea that people could have access to their own health data. And we started thinking about in education, there's a lot of data associated in education that people don't actually have their own access to. So whether it be students having access to their own assessment data, students having access to their own advancement through a game or a math program and the like, could we in fact create this notion of a My Data button so that wherever students are interacting, they could in fact click on the My Data download button and get their own data about their own learning. It's all about making data that's important to the learner available to the learner. And you'd think this sort of would already be done or it already makes sense, but it really isn't. Much data is only available, say, to the teacher, or maybe much data is not available to the parents or students ever. It informs instruction and that kind of thing, but could we in fact help everybody do better by creating more transparency around data sets? So one of the things that we did to try to promote this idea was we ran a data jam in July, where we invited people to come together and talk about data, talk about the kinds of opportunities, and to brainstorm, to think through what could we do with open data. And then in October, we followed that up with a data palooza, and the data palooza was associated with, could we in fact help people, could we in fact then spotlight the kinds of interesting things people did with that data between July and October. So the Education Data Palooza happened in October, and the videos from that, all the various presenters, they were all presenters in 7 minutes or less, presented. These all were videotaped, and we now have published these online at the website that you see on this slide. You also, by the way, can find access to all of the things that I've been talking about at ed.gov/technology. So those are the 4 initiatives that I wanted to talk about. We can talk about all sorts of other things as well. You know, your questions, we can talk about broadband and devices and bring around technology and lots of different kinds of things that people are thinking about with respect to improving the opportunity to learn. Last thing I want to say is that we're laser focused on equity and trying to figure out all of the ways that we can ensure that we don't exacerbate a digital divide, we don't exacerbate an empowerment divide as we provide more access for more people in order to vastly improve the opportunity to learn. As President Obama has said, education is a moral obligation. It's an economic imperative. We're in a fight for the future, and we know that this fight absolutely depends on education. And this is education for all of the world's citizens. So thank you very much. So you can see the website there. We are on Twitter at Office of Ed Tech. And I will now, I guess, turn it to Steve and answer questions, engage in conversation, hear from you all. I did see lots of comments going by in the chat, but I tried hard not to read them so that I could actually focus on what I was trying to say. But I'm happy to have you all here, and thanks for your comments.
Thanks, Karen. I'm clapping for you. I'm hovering over the smiley face and finding that hard to find applause button. Okay, so I'm sure there were questions that I missed in the chat, but there's one that came right here from Fred Haas. He says, there seems like there would be a whole lot of data on individual students, minors by the way. While rigorous protection is promised, who is the steward of all of it? How many hands does it pass through to be warehoused someplace in the ether?
So these are things that we are working on. We're thinking about the legal framework, the technical framework, and the policy framework that actually will support advancing privacy while in fact providing data back to students. If you think about students, and so that's one thing. The second thing is parents are absolutely in that formula. So we're not thinking about students individually without the parent and guardianship associated access. So that's a good question, and absolutely, especially when we're dealing with minors, that may not, have, they're all ages, and we want to make sure that it's appropriate, age appropriate, and developmentally appropriate as well. But there are, many places where people learn online now, right? So they might use a game or use a website that has math problem sets and the like. And much of that is not necessarily then available to students. They might earn a badge, but they don't have kind of their own data in machine readable format. What we think is that when we do begin to see more My Data download buttons, this is data that's already out there and available. It's already out there and being sort of collected. Much of this data is in school districts. So, for example, a school district might have purchased a certain course or courseware or digital environment that produces, say, student essay or writing feedback. If we can, in fact, begin to get all of this data available, people could then begin to build applications that students could download, and people could build applications where these different data sets could be mashed together to provide information back to the student. Again, it's kind of about personal empowerment and having access to your own data.
So, Karen, I wonder about the tension between the phrase of personal empowerment and this quote from President Obama. Meaning, is there a difference between educating for personal excellence, which then, in a way that we don't know, leads to economic competitiveness and security, and on the other hand, couching the argument in terms of economic competitiveness? Is that too nuanced a discussion to have?
Well, I actually don't think there's a tension at all. I think that we're talking about everybody having the best possible opportunity to rise to their highest potential, right? So we don't want to see people maybe without economic means or without, without access, not being able to have the opportunity to make the choices that that maybe people in say, in other places have, right? So I don't actually think there's a tension. I think that it's not all about economic development. It's about quality of life. It's about actually security. It's about a lot of things. But I think that there are so many reasons that we need to vastly improve the education quality for all students, not the least of which is that we want everybody to be able to make a good living for themselves and their families.
So a question from the chat. I'd like to know Karen's thoughts on guided social media. Many students under 13 are on social media, yet when we want to use some of those platforms to guide students' use, we're restricted due to the laws. Thoughts?
So there are the law is actually about collecting data about students, and there are definite, very important restrictions about students under the age of 13. So I think that's something to pay close attention to. I do think, however, there are kind of safe ways to begin to build the ability of students to communicate and collaborate effectively online together. I don't think that there is, we don't want to, you wouldn't just drop a student off in the middle of a big city and say, hey, good luck, we'll see you back at 5 o'clock. You want to guide them, you want to show them what they're looking at, you want to show them how to behave, you want to, them to understand where the dangers are, you want them to understand how to navigate, who's helpful, who's not. There are so many sort of things to learn. So it isn't that before the age of 13 students can't engage in social interactions online, but they need to be safe, secure, without collecting data about the students. But there are, many emerging environments now that are for students that are young, and it helps them begin to build the capacity to be online. I think there's an associated topic here, and that is about digital literacy writ large. And we have just like literacy with the printing press and the ability to learn from books, it necessitated that people were literate, that they could read. So when we talk about digital literacy, the ability to learn online necessitates that people understand how to be literate online and how to make the best use of these kinds of tools and resources that they have. There's an interesting, and getting a little way off the question at the moment, but there's an interesting new set of studies that points to a new divide, which happens to be about kind of the empowerment divide, and people who have access to technologies that are very well aware of how to use these technologies to ask questions, to do research, to get their own health information, to apply for jobs, to do all sorts of things that are about personal empowerment. Whereas other people who may also have access to technology but are not using the technology for personal empowerment. They're using it primarily for entertainment and for sort of light communications, right? So whether it be text messaging or phone or the like. I think that these are things that we need to pay close attention to, and we need to help everybody, all ages, adults, children, young children, begin to do a better job of figuring out how to leverage these online environments for their own needs and empowerment.
So, Karen, what about this sort of intriguing dilemma of the ways in which working on the web around passions or interests by teachers who could model it to their students is being limited by legislation that tries to reduce the contact between students and teachers outside of school? How have you thought about that?
Right. This is, and I'm not going to comment on any legislation per se, but it's something that people are really struggling with. They're trying to figure out how appropriate contact between teachers and students plays out on the web, right? So many times with these kinds of things, I think, seen behavior, new technology, right? So we've always been, vigilant and careful, and we always have thought through, what are the appropriate interactions between students and teachers, and we want to make sure that as people go online, they continue to have appropriate interactions. I think there is a bit of a fear-based and maybe reality-based pushback saying until we have the safeguards in place, let's just say you don't friend your students on Facebook, or you don't interact with them individually online. Let's stay sort of in public places. And in some cases, let's not use it at all. So I think that we as a sort of education technology leadership need to build the practices, build the understandings. We need to help teachers become incredibly literate themselves so they.
So I lost audio. Did anybody else? Looks like Karen's having an audio slowdown. There are these three little red dots that I get to see next to her name, which would indicate some kind of a bandwidth issue. Fred, I did make a note of the question that you put in the chat, and I will ask her as soon as she comes back. I just spoke in Canada recently, and in the area that I was in, they had just put... okay, are you back, Karen? It looks like Karen actually dropped out of the session completely, which would be a bandwidth issue. I'm assuming she'll come back. So I recently spoke in Canada, and in the province where I was, they had some, I don't think it was a law, but it was a regulation that said that teachers couldn't participate in anything online using their own name that was outside of school activities, where a student might find them and make the connection between them as the teacher and them as a person online. And that really worried me. It felt like the relationship piece here that's so critical is the baby that gets thrown out with the bathwater. So I'm certainly welcome anybody to talk about that or anything else while we wait for Karen to come back. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll give you the microphone, or put a note in the chat. It did seem like there was a pretty robust discussion around the difference between data driving personalization and relationships that might drive personalization. So if the possibility exists here that Karen actually lost internet, and if that's the case, that she may not come back. So why don't we give her about 5 more minutes? And again, I welcome somebody grabbing the microphone and making a comment. Anything that Karen has talked about that you would like to discuss. Rhonda, I've given you microphone privileges. Go ahead and turn your mic on by clicking on the talk button at the top left.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, as an information systems manager, data obviously is crucial to knowing what's going on. And I think in the chat box, so many people have agreed that there is a lot of data, but that doesn't necessarily maybe enhance the relationships that exist in education. And I don't know, I guess it feels like to me, even as a support person for educators and students and just my community at large, in order to be able to make an impact even on one thing that could potentially unleash the creativity or innovation or freedom for people to collaborate on more diverse climates or on more diverse subjects. I don't know that data necessarily captures, no matter how well we create the questions, captures the essence of what we're trying to do. Do you find that? Or you've been out doing your hack education tour, and I'm excited to hear the feedback from that.
Well, we have Karen back, so we're going to let the focus go back to Karen. Karen, you dropped off when we knew you had, so we started the conversation going when we were talking about the differences between data driving personalization and relationships. And it seems like maybe there's an art to using data, so it's more than just data, especially something like Amazon that does such a good job of sort of surfacing appropriate materials. So I'm going to let you comment if you'd like, and then I have a question from Fred for you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. First of all, sorry about that. I was talking on and on answering your last question, and when I looked up somewhere along the line, I was dropped off and my internet dropped, so I don't know exactly what happened, but it's back. Hopefully it won't happen again. Sorry about that. So actually use the Amazon example, and what's interesting is when they do such a good job of surfacing recommendations, that's actually all based on data. But what they don't do is what we tend to do in education, and that is give raw data, give teachers raw data and say, now be a data analyst and, here's how you read this data and figure out what to do with it. What we need is better tools and innovations that not only help students, that not only, give teachers data, but, because we talked about data-driven decision making, but rather help them know what to do because of the data, right? So take this to the next step. Just like many of the consumer channels have done now. They would never think about giving you your raw data, but actually those recommendations are based on data. So I think that data is an important important part of the fuel for this, but it is absolutely coupled with new and evolving algorithms, intelligence by researchers who know kind of how to think about this data and what to do with the data, and how to provide the best response back to the people that want to be informed by data, not giving them just raw data, but giving them kind of the what to do because of it. I'm sure there was great conversation going on when I wasn't online, and hopefully you'll continue that as well.
No. So Fred Haas asks, do you have any thoughts on the permanence of the record of learning, which a student cannot really ever shake? In the digital realm, a whole lot of learning mistakes are preserved by near perpetuity.
Oh yeah, I thought a lot about that, and we've actually had some interesting conversations with various technical working groups and researchers and the like. And this notion that how long does your record stay with you? And if you take like the professional baseball analogy, we never look at a professional baseball player's little league records, for example, right? So it is a great question. I don't have a great answer to it. There needs to be sort of an expiration date on data, I think, and how that actually plays out in the technical sphere is going to be interesting. Again, I think that there's sort of a legal frameworks, there's technical frameworks, there's policy frameworks, and I think from a policy perspective, there needs to be sort of some kind of articulation about expiration date of data. But great question.
So if you have another question for Karen, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll give you the microphone, or you can ask it in the chat. If I've missed a question, I apologize. Taylor Archer wants to know, as a student and having done online teaching, I'm curious how students will be encouraged to remain dedicated and continue to learn with data online.
Well, yes. So the big sub-question there is, one of the things, it has to do with this notion of persistence or grit or stick-to-itiveness, or how do we support students in staying with something and continuing to learn? And that's sort of a newly evolving research space. One of the things that researchers have noticed in that some students in difficult circumstances persist. They somehow transcend their circumstances and figure out how to carry on and further their own education, for example. So people are now saying, what can we learn? What do we know about persistence and grit? And then how can we create strategies to begin to develop it and support the development of persistence? I think in online spaces, it's interesting, right? So one of the things is understanding how much feedback is helpful to students and how much gets in the way, right? So if we watch students persisting at an online game or something like that, much of it has to do with collection of points, the advancement, the small incremental advancements, and this notion sort of gamification comes from that. What do we know about human nature and how people interact with an environment that will help us develop and more readily create environments that support persistence, that help students keep on going and stick to it even when they run into things that are complex or difficult.
Karen, we're waiting for some more questions. While we are, I'm interested in sort of the institutional aspects versus the grassroots. We've held this conference for 3 years at the same time as the State Department's International Education Week, and we can't even get it listed on their schedule because they don't have a place for putting online events in. How do you transfer the energy from grassroots to getting support from the institution without losing the value of the grassroots?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at this, especially now being, at federal government, is I just think it's an all hands on deck, right? So I think some things are going to be done institutionally and from the top down, and some things are sort of self-organized and perpetuated and much more grassroots. There's a tremendous value in grassroots organization, and I mean, speaking of building persistence and building engagement and furthering understanding, I mean, I think grassroots is incredibly important. The whole you run into these funny things in a bureaucracy. I have no idea why they couldn't figure out how to post an online conference in the context of a week of events. It doesn't necessarily. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. But I think that I think that it's both. It's yes and, right? So yes, we need grassroots. Yes, we need top down. Yes, we need processes and funding at all levels and innovation at all levels. we are really trying to figure out all of the ways that we support innovation and sort of moving from being sort of a bureaucratic organization that focuses on compliance and following rules and filling out forms and providing reports to an organization that supports decision making at all levels and supports innovation and multiple strategies for getting to a high set of shared goals. So it's yes and.
I'm going to give the microphone to Kaylin. Kaylin, to turn your mic on, you click on the talk button at the top left, or maybe you were clapping. You're certainly welcome to make a comment, or anybody else is welcome to raise their hand. That's the third icon over in the participant window. It looks like a hand. You can let me know you want to take the microphone, or you can put a question in the chat. Karen, I've been buried with conference preparation, so I haven't watched the news at all. What happens in a transition phase for you in your job right now?
So everybody so Secretary Duncan has said publicly that he intends to stay, and everybody carries on. I mean, it's interesting, right? So, there was a bit of a lull right before the election that people sort of, were just kind of waiting to see the outcome and that kind of thing. But with a second 4 years, now people sort of double down and carry on with their efforts. So the initiatives that I have talked about here, many of those would have gone on regardless of a or could have, right? So there are some contracts like the Connected Educator project. We have another one that's an evidence framework project. Those are contracts, external contracts, and those would go on even to some extent with a change in administration. But with the current administration, the continuity, over 8 years is, I think from my perspective, being here for a little over 3 years, I think it's incredibly helpful. So we carry on, we continue with our projects, we keep focusing and keep listening and learning.
Okay, so of course, the last few minutes we get a deluge of questions here. Richard's raised his hand. Richard, I'm going to go to Fred's first question, then I'll come to you and let you take the mic. So Fred wants to know if you have any advice, Karen, for teachers, like the ones attending here, that often know more about these issues than their administrators, who at times are running scared.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is to be the best possible leader you can be. I think leadership is where you find it, and I think that many leaders come from teacher ranks, from librarian ranks, from all sorts of places. In some cases, parent ranks, right? So, in addition to sort of the traditional leadership of principals and superintendents and the like, teacher leadership has never been more important, and I think maybe never been more appreciated than it is now. And and so I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, for teachers, there's a tremendous need to support teachers at all places along the continuum. So I actually don't think it's about age in terms of like digital native, digital immigrants. I do think it's about attitude. And I think that we have to figure out all the strategies for making every single teacher feel welcome and competent. So I tend to think that every teacher is college educated and is completely able to use technology for their own personal growth, right? So, or their own just their own personal lives, right? So whether they communicate with their children, whether they are keeping in touch with family members on Facebook, or whether they're shopping online, or they're getting health information, or they're joining communities for their own personal interests, whatever it is, most teachers, I would say today, are capable. So it's like standing on what's there now. And creating the expectations that those around you would like to kind of take things to the next level. The second part of this, so that's personal. The second part is how teachers view technology for their own professional learning. So as we talked about earlier, Are they thinking about their personal learning network? Do they know that there are communities that they can join? So if they have a student, say, on the autism spectrum for the first time, and they've been teaching for 10 years, do they know that they could join a community online and begin to get assistance from a variety of people? So just like they probably learned how to leverage technology in their personal lives, figuring out how to leverage technology in their professional lives. And then the third area that I think for teachers is the most interesting and the sort of place we are now, and I think this is going to require, again, all hands on deck, designing and developing and innovating together, and that is the ability as students gain access. So imagine, if you will, students all have access to their own device for learning, wondering, questioning, researching, keeping their portfolio, etc. What are the kinds of assignments now? What are the kinds of projects? What are the kinds of interactions and engagements that teachers now can design that they really couldn't do before? That's the area that I think we need teachers that have been involved for a longer time to begin to publish and to share the kinds of things that you're now able to do, because we do know that changes. You don't have to ask students to memorize something necessarily, or to learn something, or to answer the questions at the back of the chapter. Those are the kinds of things that will give way to more complex assignments as students begin to have access to their own devices and to be able to work in participatory groups or small groups or whatever to solve more complex challenges.
I've given Richard the microphone. Richard, I think you know the drill here. Click on the talk button to turn your mic on. And while we're waiting for Richard, Maureen asked a question.
I've got it.
Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
I've been watching this work for around 20 years. I work with both trauma in U.S. and in Africa. As we build these huge portals which deal with content, it's very clean academically to do reports and test on that. But half of the 2 million teachers that we've produced have walked out of the classroom predominantly because of emotional issues. So all of this content or curriculum must fit into a classroom that half of it's divorced, 1 in 6 sexually abused, all of these emotional issues. And I guess the best way to explain it, I could create a report and demonstrate with a group of homeless women that they have literacy, that they can fill out a welfare form. But if the emotional levels that deal with mentoring and that aren't taken care of, they won't even fill out the welfare form. So my concern as we go down this testing route is that the current teachers are not being trained professionally to deal with the emotional state and the contextual state of which all this information is supposed to fit in. And I would love you to just comment on what the thrust is to deal with that state of the classroom to fit this content into and make it work right.
Yeah, I mean, that is a
huge topic.
It's a huge topic and a point really well taken. And I think that, what we need to continue to stay laser focused on is what is the role of technology and what's the role of people, and make sure that that we aren't asking, that we're leveraging technology to do the things technology can do, and we then in that, hopefully we're freeing up people time to do what people inherently do best, and that is interact, support, listen, find further resources, understand the nuances of a learner's situation. I mean, it's incredibly complex. I'll use one really simple example. When Khan Academy first came online, I would have reporters asking, the question, well, is this going to replace teaching? Now we can have teachers online, will this replace teachers? And I would respond and say, absolutely not, because explaining is not the sum total of teaching. And that what these kinds of new videos and online experts and explanations do, they free up the teacher so they don't have to continually explain something over and over and over again. They scaffold, they support, they augment human interaction and human instruction, and that is incredibly helpful to teachers. If teachers can offload some of those things that they have been doing and think about grading. If they can offload some of those things to appropriate technologies, then they can have more time for individual and small group interaction and supporting the types of things in a learning environment that only people really can support.
I agree, particularly I think the reason why Khan works well, and I helped a number of e-learning companies launch which failed, is that Khan is a piece of a lesson that the human side of the teacher works. For instance, I teach poetry to homeless women, and they write their poetry on a computer and then publish it.
It is, and only because we've got sessions starting right now in other rooms, and I really apologize for interrupting, but
no
Karen,
problem.
I'm going to clap for you here. Applause. Thank you so much. Really delightful to hear from you. Richard, you'll take it out on me later, I know.
Sure. Thank you, and keep in touch, everyone. I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for letting us finish on time. Thanks to Karen Cator. Thanks for being here as a part of the Global Education Conference. Take care. Bye now.